what does it mean to be human? A phrase that seems so simple on the outside but is internally complex. SOMA is a lot like this. On the outside, it looks like a pretty simple horror game. But going deeper in, you realize this is a psychological nightmare that is possibly one of the best stories in a horror game. SOMA is made for one sole purpose. It forces you to explore what it means to be you, and more specifically, what it means to have consciousness. These ideas are implemented so well into SOMA that it creates a psychological horror game like no other. But what makes it so great, and how did SOMA accomplish this? Well, that's why today we're going to look at SOMA and slowly take it apart to see how it creates such a perfect formula for psychological horror. So with that said, make sure to stab the bell icon and let's get right into the world of SOMA. So first and foremost, what is psychological horror? In order for us to understand what makes a great psychological horror game, we first need to understand what it actually means. And when looking it up, you'll find that it's a subgenre that focuses on mental, psychological, and emotional states that a character goes through, using them as ways to relate and scare the audience at the same time. And when looking at this definition, it really does fit SOMA in every way. But before I get ahead of myself, let's take a quick run through of the story in SOMA, and then go back and analyze the more psychological parts of the game. Now, when starting the game, you play as Simon Jarrett, who lives in Toronto, Canada, and has just woken up from a terrible nightmare about a girl named Ashley. And exploring Simon's apartment, you find out him and Ashley were actually involved in a serious car crash. It killed Ashley and left Simon with permanent brain damage that could slowly lead to his death. And this would explain why Simon has been going to Dr. Munchie, a neuroscientist who has been researching in neurograph scans to allow testing on the brain without risk. This led to Simon being the very first brain scan on May 2nd of 2015. But as soon as Simon got scanned, he seemingly teleported to a totally different location, or maybe even time traveled. After Simon explores the sci-fi area, you realize you're actually deep underwater in a facility called Upsilon, which is part of a sprawling underwater research complex called Pathos 2, a multinational research organization. But as you keep exploring this facility, you realize something is terribly wrong. Not one human being is around, just futuristic machinery and tons of this black goop and this weird tentacle-like machinery infecting the building. Thankfully, Simon comes across Catherine Chun over the speaker, and she tells Simon to go to the comm center to get a better signal. This forces Simon to venture through the thermal plant and comes across a sentient robot that is far from friendly. After avoiding the horrifying robot, Simon explores more and manages to make it to the comm center, and realizes a huge event had took place on the Earth's surface, making it uninhabitable. But Simon continues and connects to Lambda to talk to Catherine again, and she asks him what's going on. Simon explains that he came from Toronto and shows his complete confusion on the whole situation. Catherine finds this whole thing very odd and tells him to meet in Lambda, but before they can continue their conversation, the comm center breaks apart and floods. Simon miraculously survives, but something is most definitely off. How is he able to breathe underwater, and where did he get a suit? With all these questions, Simon makes his way to Lambda, finding more rogue robots and old abandoned buildings. Eventually, he makes it to Lambda and finally gets to meet Catherine in person, only to find her to be a robot as well. This leads to Simon having a full mental breakdown because he was hoping to find another human like himself. But Catherine quickly corrects him and says that he himself is also a robot. But Simon quickly deflects what she says, not wanting to believe the truth. After this, Catherine tells him to put her into the Omni tool so she could guide him. She explains to you about a very important project of hers called the Ark, an artificial reality capsule. It's a complex device that runs a huge virtual world filled with brain scans from real people to send out into space to continue what's left of humanity. And after she explained the details, she asks you to help her find it and launch the Ark into space. And Simon, with nothing really left to do, agrees, and this starts their long and dangerous trek to launching the Ark. While going through the different parts of Pathos 2, you hear and see everything that has ensued upon humanity through the old messages and recordings. And you slowly discover what happened to Simon during the brain scan and what he has become. You learn more about Simon and how he's a legacy scan, and that somehow his brain scan was put into the robot suit by the WoW. You learn that the Earth was struck by a comet, leaving everyone on the surface dead, and sparing everyone in the ocean in Pathos 2. You also learn about the WoW, a biological engineered computer system located in Site Alpha. The WoW was designed to help and oversee people in Pathos 2, but after the comet, it's been trying to do everything it can to continue what it sees as life. You'll find brain scans on all sorts of robots, humans just barely kept alive by the WoW, and tons of other humans turn into monsters because of the WoW's influence. But even with all those obstacles caused by the WoW, you and Catherine managed to make it into the Omega Space Gun facility and launch the Ark into space. And that's where the game ends. Now that we generally understand the story, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what makes SOMA such a great psychological horror game. Starting from the beginning. This is where SOMA implements one of the most important steps in the game. It allows you to relate to the main character, which, if we look back at the definition of psychological horror, it talks about being able to relate to the character on a mental, psychological, and emotional level. Simon's story is very relatable and human. And as you're exploring his apartment, you learn a lot about who he is and what he's currently going through emotionally. The apartment is trashed and messy. It's dimly lit, pizza boxes left on the floor. I mean, his refrigerator is filled with a bunch of TV dinner and pizza. There's a saying, your home reflects your state of mind. And this is very true here with Simon's apartment. But even though his apartment isn't in the best state, you can still get a glimpse of what Simon was like before the accident. He works at a bookstore based on his call with Jess. He also seems to enjoy books and movies with movie posters and books around his apartment. He also has a camera and has taken photos with it, showing his love for photography. All this helps us to understand who Simon is and makes it easy for us to relate to him on a deeper level. All the way from the apartment to getting his brain scanned, it helps to show who he is and what his day looks like. The call in the subway, for example, with Jess was such a nice touch. It doesn't seem that important in the whole grand scheme of things, but the conversation between both of them feels so real and tangible. It really does feel like two good friends having a conversation.
Jesse.
Hey, Simon. I got your email. Just wanted to wish you good luck and let you know I got you covered.
Thanks. I should be able to come to the store after this scan.
Don't sweat it. I got Matt and Chris helping me out.
Maddie from SNL?
Guess you didn't hear? He's coming in full time, working the comics section.
That's Ashley's job.
Yeah, well, you know.
Forget it. Not doing her any favors by leaving an empty spot. Not like she's coming back.
Well, good luck. Hope they find a way to reverse the whole, dying thing.
Dying thing? You're the worst support ever.
What should I say?
I'll see you later, Jesse. Don't burn the place down while I'm gone.
Over and out, buddy.
It makes Simon more likable and makes us care more about his situation. It's all to set up the first part of psychological horror, to relate to the character's mental, psychological, and emotional state. Now, when he enters the brain scan and wakes up in Upsilon, that's where things take a huge shift. The game doesn't focus as much on making you feel related to the character anymore, because now Simon and you the player lines up perfectly with the story. Simon has woken up in a mysterious area and has no clue what brought him here. And that's exactly how the player feels. And because of this, you relate even stronger to Simon, because now you both want answers to what happened and how to fix it. You quite literally experience everything through Simon's eyes. So because of this, SOMA doesn't have to focus as much on making us relate to him. We are Simon and are meant to view the world with him. Now, this is when the game brings, I guess you could say, trials. And I don't mean like a challenge type of trial, it's more of a philosophical trial. And the setup for the first one is when you enter the thermal plant control room, before talking to Catherine. When in this control room, you quickly find out you have to unplug the robot to get the thermal plant up and running again. But after doing so, the robot quickly starts hyperventilating, saying, "I need it," then questions you, saying why, "I was happy," before fully shutting down.
I need it. Why? I was okay. I was happy.
This is the first real sign of a sentient robot, and the fact that it makes you feel bad for what you did, especially since it's set up in a way where you can only see it as an object in a way that you just have to unplug real quick, only to find out that there's something there behind those robotic eyes, it surprises you as a player and makes you think about what you did and question why the robot thought laying there, looking almost lifeless, was considered a happy life. Now, let's keep this in mind and move forward to the first trial. After you escape the construct created by the WoW, you find yourself in a room upstairs. And in this area, you come across another robot named Carl. But it's different. This sentient robot truly believes it's human and currently injured. And no matter how blunt Simon gets with him, he doesn't ever acknowledge that he's a robot. He says he can literally see parts of his human body and actually gets mad at Simon for being so persistent on him being a robot.
Listen, I don't want to alarm you, but I think you might be trapped in a robot.
I'm telling you, get your eyes checked. I'm right here. I see both my hands, both my feet. When you remote, all you see is like a video feed from the helper unit. Your own body is entirely out of the picture.
And you can't really blame him, because going back while you're exploring, you'll find recordings of the same Carl talking to other members of Pathos, and you even come across his dead body near where the robot is. What's happened is the WoW, in an attempt to keep humanity alive, has been putting brain scans into robots that are just meant to help with production. This is why Carl has such a hard time believing he is a robot. It's because during his brain scan, he was once human, and that's all he knows. But this is when the first trial comes up. In order for you to get up into the comm center, you have to either shut down Carl and endure his horrific screams, or go in another room and shut down the thermal plant, which will allow the construct to chase you again. You are given a choice. You can decide whether this replication of human consciousness is worth saving and endangering your own life for. This is the only Carl left. His real human self was killed, so is he worth saving? Or is it worth hearing him scream in agony when you turn off the power in the room? I think it's interesting because these trials don't affect the outcome of the game in any way. It will always be the same no matter the choice. And if you're invested in the story and the ideas that are being given to you, it's really more about what you view as consciousness and what you don't view as consciousness. It makes the player focus internally rather than, okay, how do I get the good ending or bad ending? It's kind of like the shopping cart theory, where the act of returning a shopping cart reflects a person's moral character, because it's totally self-governed. No one tells you to do it, and you certainly won't end up in trouble for not returning the shopping cart. It's totally up to you on whether you want to or not, because either way, you get the same outcome. And I think the game is doing the same thing here. It doesn't want to give the player an ulterior motive. It wants you to go off of how you feel about the situation and only the situation at hand. This first trial is a huge moment because the game is getting into your head and making you think about a topic that you may have not even thought about before, exploring the idea of artificial consciousness for the first time. And as we keep going farther into the game's story, you realize it keeps opening up more questions and ideas. Later, when you're in the ocean making your way into the shuttle to Lambda, you come across these Scavengers. And at first they seem delusional with phrases like, "You're real, please give me some," or "Why are you making me do this?" It doesn't make sense till later in the game, because you end up learning more about the power of structure gel. It's this black liquid substance that seems to be produced by the WoW. Its main purpose was to connect different forms of machinery, increase functionality of basic machines, and repair any structural or electrical damages. But after the comet struck Earth, the WoW changed the coding of the substance to be used to mutate living tissue and organisms, and to bring organisms back to life. The problem arises though, when organisms are brought back to life, they seem to be in a sleepwalking state. Also, the gel doesn't last forever and eventually dries out. Now, going back to the scavenger encounter, you might be able to piece it together. The reason this robot is saying "don't be greedy, why are you making me do this?" and asking you got some to spare when chasing you is because it's running low on structure gel and is wanting some of yours since you're a robot. It's even sadder when you realize it's another brain scan put into these robots, and they seem to be aware of the situation. At one point, the scavenger will say everyone's just gone, and "You're real, please give me some." It seems they've been roaming around in the ocean for a while, all alone, looking for someone to help them, or to keep them alive a little longer. It's really sad when you think about it, being alone in the dark ocean, not seeing anyone else alive, while also being confused why you're now a robot. It makes you wonder why the WoW would do this. Even though it's not the original person in this robot, it still has a consciousness and is almost an exact copy of the human mind. Is this morally wrong, or is it okay because it's not human? This is another way the game gets you thinking about the ideas of consciousness. But just when you're starting to understand how you feel about everything, SOMA throws another curveball on you. As you keep going, you make it into the shuttle and come across your second trial. While trying to locate the power to the shuttle, you find out it's all been rerouted by the WoW to keep Amy alive. For once, it's a real person, a talking, breathing person. but she has been intertwined with the WoW. It seems to be breathing for her and circulating her blood for her body. Basically, she's just barely living, but the problem arises when you have to unplug her to power the shuttle. This is where the choice comes in. You can partially unplug Amy and just have enough power to start the shuttle, but Amy will be in a lot of discomfort from that point forward until someone helps her out of that situation, which, knowing where we are, will probably never happen. Or you could unplug Amy entirely, killing her, and gain full power in the shuttle. Now, depending on who you are, it might seem like an easy choice, but the game is asking, what if Carl was human? Would you still power him down? Both their circumstances are kinda similar, and I think this is intentional because if you left Carl alive, he'd be sitting there for who knows how long, plus he is a copy of his former self. Whereas Amy, she is a real human being, but she is obviously suffering, and by leaving her there for no one to help her, is it really worth keeping her alive? I think SOMA is making you question why you saved Carl and not Amy, or why you saved Amy but not Carl, depending on the decision you make. This is where the game really starts to make you think about the situations and the choices you made. Slowly but surely, the game is creeping into your mind and implanting these very interesting questions into what you view as consciousness. Now, continuing forward, once you make it into Lambda, like I said before, you find out Catherine is just another brain scan. But what's interesting is Simon doesn't ever question himself. Even when breathing underwater, having a built-in flashlight, and having static vision when near the WoW's monsters. But Catherine tells Simon,
"Have you looked at yourself lately? You're a walking, talking diving suit with some electronics slapped on for good measure."
I don't...
You don't want to think about it? We'll start thinking about it.
I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be this. I want out.
And the reason I'm talking about this is because he's not much different from Carl when you think about it. When the comm center flooded, you got a glimpse of Simon's delusions of being human. You see him realizing that he's in fact not human but something else. Simon's brain is just suppressing this idea because it makes him feel uncomfortable. Catherine and Simon talk about this in more detail later in the game when heading to Theta on the Zeppelin. Catherine explains that his brain is covering up that he's a robot and is suppressing it so he doesn't go insane. It's trying to make him feel as normal as possible because his human body is all he knows.
I just can't stop thinking about what we've become. It's clear that we're no longer human. But then how can I feel like Simon? How can I feel like anything at all? I mean, technically I don't have any ears, no mouth. Christ, that's a weird thing to think about. I mean, I'm making sounds. I'm still saying things.
You sure are. Okay. Your new body most likely has senses similar to those you had as a human. And your mind, only knowing one way to perceive the world, superimposes that skill set on top of your new features.
So my mind is covering it up, pretending nothing's different.
If it didn't, you'd probably be incapable of interacting with the world at all. And the stress would either kill you or make you go insane.
This would explain why you can hear him breathing when running, or even underwater where it sounds like he's in a suit. It's very interesting seeing Simon trying to come to terms that he's a robot, and he never truly seems to get over the hump of accepting who he has become. But now knowing this, it explains why some robots don't acknowledge that they are a robot like Carl. Their brain is suppressing that thought to keep them sane. And this makes you question if this was a real situation, would these brain scans experience this too? Or would they be quick to acknowledge it in real life? Either way, it's an interesting concept. Now, as you continue to Theta, you find a lone robot stuck right outside the entrance. You quickly find out it's Robin's brain scan in this robot, and she truly believes she made it inside the Ark. She talks about how the last thing she remembers was killing herself, at least she thinks she did. Her thought process was, if you want you yourself to survive and experience the Ark, you have to kill yourself right after the brain scan to have your true self in the Ark.
Hello?
Who is that? Mark?
No, we haven't met before.
Is this the Ark?
I think we're safe.
Oh, I was so worried something had gone wrong.
What's your name?
Robin Bass, Theta Field Service Technician.
Nice to meet you, Robin. How did you get here?
I got scanned, like the others. And then I killed myself. At least I think so. I can't remember that part.
How does that work? Did dying get you into the Ark?
Wow, you're definitely not from Theta. Let me guess, Omnicron? Wasn't sure Catherine would be able to scan you guys. You're lucky. There was a lot of talk about this at Theta. The idea is, when you're activated in the Ark, there's basically two of you, right? One human, one living scan in the Ark. You don't want your copy to survive you. You yourself want to survive on the Ark. If the human you dies before the scan is initiated, or closely after, you yourself would live on in the Ark. Amazing, right?
As you can tell, it's a horrible situation. She continues talking about how weird it is being in the Ark, and asks herself where everyone is. Unfortunately, Simon doesn't have the strength to tell her the truth.
I'm not sure how to say this.
What?
This is
Yeah?
pretty amazing, right? I mean, the Ark.
Yeah, it's great. Catherine and the guys have really pulled through. They saved us all.
You're only left with two choices for this third trial. You can unplug her and continue forward,
Let me go!
or just leave her out there, in the dark ocean, all alone, with her still believing she's in the Ark, questioning where everyone went. Personally, I think it would have been interesting to see how Robin would have reacted if Simon told her what was actually going on. I wonder if she would refuse to listen to the truth and stay ignorant, or would she have a mental breakdown? Either way, it would have been interesting to have that in the game, but maybe Frictional Games wanted this moment for you to decide, not Robin. If she knew, it would have diluted the difficulty of the choices, because I feel Robin would strongly want to continue living or be turned off, which would totally destroy the whole point of this trial, to get you to decide if she's worth being kept alive or not. So maybe that's why this doesn't happen in the game. Now, this trial kind of introduces you to a certain belief that ran around in Theta. It all started with Mark Sarang's continuity belief. From his notes and recordings in his room, you hear him talk about how our brain cells die and get replaced by new cells. It happens all the time, but this process doesn't affect our consciousness, and we feel the same. So he says if you kill yourself right after the scan, you'll be the closest to being you in the brain scan, continuing to be you yourself, since your experience will continue off of your physical body to your digital self.
Did you know that the human body consists of up to 75 trillion individual cells? They typically don't stay with us till we die. Some live a few days, while others live a few years. We're not affected by their short lifespans, as they're replaced by new cells which help sustain our bodies. I don't think anyone would argue that we ever lose our persona due to this process. Yet we are clearly in a constant state of transformation. Then how do we remain the same? A continuous flow of thought and perception keeps an unbroken chain of continuity that we know as our self. Our conscious mind is not the pattern of our brain, but a continuous emergent entity based on that pattern. When Dr. Jun populates the Ark, she is capturing a moment of our existence and placing it inside the digital world. Soon you and your digital you will grow apart due to diverging experiences, but for a tiny window, you are the very same. With unbroken continuity, it will live on. A fulfilling life, no doubt, no less real than the one from which it was plucked. Now remember, you are not your body. You are the emergent entity. That entity just happens to occupy two places at once for a while. If you took away your body, you would simply be the only one you can be. The you inside the Ark. Let your body die and continue on in the digital paradise among the stars.
It's really interesting when you think about it, because every 7 to 10 years, our cells actually do get replaced. So does that mean my 12-year-old self is a different version of me? Or is it an exact copy? We know mutations can occur, which is why we get things like cancer and tumors, along with boatloads of other problems, not to mention emerging allergies. So is it so far-fetched to say that you slowly become a slightly different version of yourself? It's really interesting. I went down this rabbit hole for a while, but to be honest, it's way out of my understanding. But if you have time, it's definitely worth a look. But I digress. After Mark Saran kills himself and people hear about his belief, other people follow suit, like Robin Bass, for example. When exploring the staff's room, you find Robin's and see blood all over the bed. You find out she killed herself with a razor blade and left a note saying she puts full faith in Sarang's continuity belief. During all this, Catherine, the one that has been working on Project Arc and the brain scans, is forced to stop because it got so bad.
What happened?
Conrad killed himself after the scan.
Jesus, how?
Maser tool? What should I do?
I'm gonna need to tell Strohmeyer.
No, please! I'm so close. Strohmeyer's gonna shut down the Arc project. It's not my fault people keep killing themselves.
Catherine, what are you gonna do? It's not like you can sneak a 300-pound body out of the lab.
I know.
Catherine, are you okay?
Not even close.
It's really weird because in this situation, I could honestly see this happen in real life if the environment was the same. Thankfully, there is some kind of good that comes from exploring Theta. When exploring, you eventually find out that Simon was the very first person to get a brain scan, and Dr. Munchie was the first person to create such a thing. This made Simon a legacy scan, a basic AI model to work off of for creating advanced AI and for learning on the subject. And putting this together, this would mean he isn't the most advanced AI. He's the first, and it makes me wonder in what ways are the newer brain scans different and better. Either way, after this discovery, you have to try and get a code from one of the old employees, Brandon. You end up using Brandon's brain scan to run a small simulation to trick him into giving you the code. It feels really wrong, especially since each time you fail, you can see how much distress he's in, and I'm sure booting him up and shutting him down doesn't do any favors either. Eventually, you find the best way to trick him, and you just feel slimy for doing it.
That wasn't so bad. Strohmeyer really got me worked up, bastard.
Well, that's what you get for listening to his stories.
I guess I had it coming.
About Strohmeyer. He's sending you to the news site for ASAP. What should I tell him?
It's alright. I can talk to him.
Wait, didn't Sean just tell you to take it easy? Don't worry, I'm not gonna tell anyone.
I do feel hungover. Okay. It's 1729 over 42, 12 over 407. Got it?
Yeah, I got it. I'm sorry, Mr. Wan. Right. Goodbye.
No, wait.
Overall, at this point in the game, you start to really feel how dark and lonely this game feels, and how hopeless the story really is. It makes you wonder how worth it actually is to launch the Ark into space. What would that really do? At least for me, these are the questions going through my head, because the game keeps showing me all these horrible things happening in each facility. It's hard to stay positive in this environment that doesn't have 1 ounce of positivity besides maybe the Ark. And it just keeps getting worse. When entering Omnicron, you'll notice the insane amount of dead bodies with no heads. Yes, that's right, every body you encounter is either overtaken by the WoW, or is just straight up missing a head. And as you explore Omnicron, you start to get the whole picture. It all started with Dr. Ross, who was found dead on the climber. He was brought into a containment chamber, and shortly after, the staff started experiencing all sorts of horrible symptoms. Headaches, nosebleeds, and even bleeding from the eyes. These were all symptoms caused unknowingly to the staff by the WoW, exerting control over electromagnetic fields to heal and resuscitate Dr. Ross through the structure gel inside his body. And at some point in the healing process, Dr. Ross gained some kind of telepathic abilities, which he used to speak to Riley Herbert, the Omnicron's dispatcher. She was the only one to believe the doctor's story about the WoW, Site Alpha, and his plan to destroy it. The plan was Riley was going to take the poison structure gel and put it into the WoW to shut it down. But before this could be done, the WoW shrieked, creating the most intense surge of electromagnetic energy.
Things are out of hand. The staff looks like they're about to explode. Every other person walks around with nosebleeds, and the rest keep wiping stains of blood from their eyes to keep them from overflowing. That's to do with the WoW trying to free Ross somehow, for sure. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if the body just got up and left. Rally Herber, our dispatcher, has been snooping around asking questions she shouldn't. She says she's going down into the abyss to find Alpha. I can't bring myself to stop her.
It was so bad that the black boxes, a device that's put into the staff's heads to aid medical personnel, blew up every single employee in Omnicron, which is why everybody is missing their head. It's truly disturbing, and it's even creepier because you can't read any of the black boxes like you could before, because, well, their head is missing. But even through this horrible story, one good thing comes from it. Dr. Ross is still alive. He's horrifically mutated, but alive, and talks to Simon and gets him to use the poison gel for when Simon transfers to a tougher power suit to venture into the abyss. This brings us to the 4th trial, and possibly one of the most interesting trials in the game. Basically, your goal in Omnicron is to get a battery, Cortex chip, and structure gel to allow Simon to transfer into the more robust power suit. But when it comes to actually transferring yourself to that said power suit, you hear your older self still talking. And this is when Simon, understandably so, gets pissed. He finds out he didn't get transferred, he got copied over. And now his older self sits there, waiting to be turned off or left there.
There must be something wrong. Can't you run a diagnosis or something?
What was that?
No, it's just...
Why was it still talking?
It's the same like before.
Catherine, why was he still talking?
That's how it works, you know that.
What do you mean?
You know it's not magic. You were copied. The sleeping Simon in the seat was copied, and now you are here, just like Simon lived on in Toronto.
God damn you, Kath. 2 Simons? There can't be 2 Simons.
What did you think would happen?
That you were gonna take my mind and put it into another body, like a brain transplant.
I'm sorry, it wouldn't work that way.
You realize how messed up this is?
Please, I didn't mean to upset you.
How did you expect me to react to this shit?
Please stop.
You're fucking disgusting. What's gonna happen to him?
He'll sleep for a while, a few days.
And then what? Wake up in this fucking nightmare again? All alone? So cruel.
Well, what do you want me to do with him? Make friends? Let him know that we have to leave him behind when we go into the abyss?
What if he didn't need to wake up?
You'd do that?
I don't know. Maybe.
This is where the 4th trial starts. You can either leave your old self behind for him to wake up alone, feeling betrayed and scared, or you can shut him down. Now, mind you, the story shifts to the new Simon's perspective, but realistically, you wouldn't be transferring over like we see in the game. We'd still be in the old Simon, so you'd essentially be killing yourself. It's truly a weird concept, and I love that you get to decide whether you want to let your old self live or not. For me, this is one of the biggest moments in the game because it demonstrates firsthand what it's like copying over a brain scan to something else. It's a continuation of yourself, but you, your true self, won't get to experience that continuation. And it just makes you wonder how you would solve this problem and how you would make it so you could continue your consciousness while still being the true you. I know I've said this a lot already, but it's just all so fascinating to think about. Now, after this transfer, you go down to the climber into the abyss. And I just gotta say, if you have thalassophobia, you probably won't make it through this part. It's dark and hard to see. The only thing you have are some tiny lights that barely work. And oh yeah, you have these things hunting you down while you're making your way to Tau. It can even be hard to see because of these storms that take place in the abyss. It's truly a nightmare if you have thalassophobia. But it all gets better when you enter Tau, at least for a little while. You encounter a creepy diving suit walking around. It's another one of the WoW's monsters. But eventually you make it into the main lobby and find the team in horrible condition. Most of them are already consumed by the WoW, barely living, and the rest are just flat out dead. But as you explore, you come across Sarah Lindwall, the last known human being on Earth, and she's right there, protecting the Ark at her side. You can tell she's barely surviving, she's malnourished and has a tough time talking, but you have a bittersweet conversation with her. She trusts you to take the Ark into space, but she wants you to kill her.
You're the first normal living human I've seen.
There's not many left down here. Most of them are up on the plateau.
You mean at Omnicron?
Yeah.
There's no one alive at Omnicron.
You've been there?
I've been all over. The power plant at Upsilon, the ruins of Lambda, the abandoned Delta. Theta?
You've been to Theta?
There's not a lot left of Pathos 2.
And, I'm the only living person you've met? You mean I'm the last living human on the planet?
I'm sorry.
Who are you again?
Simon Jarrett.
Stationed out?
Nowhere. I used to work in a bookshop in Toronto. Long story.
Then what the hell are you doing here?
I'm trying to find the Ark.
Why would you? How do you know about that?
I've heard it's the last hope for mankind.
Damn right it is. Now what do you want with it?
Take it to the Gun at Phi. Launch it into space.
That was the plan, all right. I've been guarding it ever since we brought it back to Tau. Just couldn't bring myself to let go. To tell you the truth, I don't have the strength to argue. And I certainly don't have the time to wait for the next sentient thing shuffling through here. Go ahead. Take it.
Thank you. Can I get you anything? Do anything for you?
You could kill me.
Good one.
Of course, Simon doesn't want to do this and tells her it feels wrong. She's the last human alive after all. Shouldn't we try to keep her alive? But she says,
Simon, this fucking sucks. I don't want to live like this.
and this is the 5th trial, where you get to decide to let her go or keep her alive against her will. It's really sad. I think the line that hits me the hardest is when you decide to let her go.
Would you stay with me, please? It won't be long now. Please, just stay. What a crazy thing this was. Life. At least I won't have to turn 30. Hooray! Wish I could have died at home with my friends. You ever been to Greenland? It's very beautiful. Well, at least when you get out of the city. Nanook is busy, and yes, there's like 12 million people trying to get around, but it's a great place. Or rather, it was a great place before the comet ended it all. You know what? I prefer it this way. I liked Pathos. Liked my colleagues. Ian, Nick, Jasper, even Catherine. People thought she was weird because she was quiet, but she was cool. Simon, you still there?
I'm here, Sarah.
Don't let him die, okay? Send them out there. To the stars.
It just hurts to know that she's so young. She had so much time ahead of her, only for all to be cut short because of the comet and the WoW. It's truly heartbreaking to watch her slowly lose the life in her eyes. I think Soma did a really good job at making this impactful by keeping this towards the end. After all you go through from Upsilon, Lambda, Curie, Theta, and Omnicron, you finally find a living human being unaffected by the WoW, only for her to want to die and move on. And at this point in the game, you're really invested in the story Soma is telling, and you're immersed, so it truly feels exciting to come across Sarah. And because of that, it becomes just as disappointing to see her go, if you choose to do that. It also makes you question why not let her live. If you let her go, what made you do so? She was in the best condition compared to the others. Plus, we still aren't sure if she's the last human left. And if you don't kill her, why did you go against her wishes? What makes you so sure that her life will be worth living? How can you make her life worth living? It's some truly tough and deep questions that I still find myself thinking about sometimes. Now, thankfully, the last trial isn't as sad. Basically, when you're on your way to the Phi station to shoot the Ark into space, you come across Site Alpha, the facility that houses the WoW. Going in, the infected Dr. Ross tells you to put your arm inside the WoW, since you house the poison structure gel. This is where you're given the last trial. You can either leave and let the WoW continue its mission to keep everything alive, or you can shut down the WoW for good. Again, there's no real difference between each choice. Either way, Dr. Ross will still try to kill you and get killed in the process. But I think the game is making you ask yourself one last question. Is the WoW considered good or bad? We know it doesn't think and only does what it's told. Its only mission is to keep everything alive. Is it really the WoW's fault because the staff working on it didn't give it the right guidelines? Or is it really that good when it causes so much pain and suffering? There's a possibility for the WoW to evolve and fix its mistakes and realize there's a better solution. Or maybe give it a bit of guidance to start doing what we view as morally okay. The WoW itself isn't bad, but it's what we view as bad. I think for most, it's a pretty easy question to answer because of all the horrible things you experienced caused by the WoW. But I think that's what the trial is going for. Now, after this, you end up in Sci-Fi and set up the Omega space gun to launch the Ark. And during this, you and Catherine are uploading your brain scans into the Ark before it launches. But Simon unfortunately forgets that you yourself don't transfer over, and gets really upset towards Catherine when he finds out they won't get to experience the Ark.
I'm still here. I'm still here. Catherine? Catherine?
I'm here.
What the hell happened? What went wrong?
Nothing. They're out there, among the stars. We're here.
No. We were getting on the Ark. I saw it. It finished loading just before it launched.
Yeah, I saw.
Then why are we still here?
Simon, I can't keep telling you how it works. You won't listen. You know why we're here. You were copied onto the Ark. You just didn't carry over. You lost the coin toss. We both did. Just like Simon at Omnicron, just like the man who died in Toronto 100 years ago.
No. This is bullshit. We came all this way. We launched the Ark.
I know it sucks, but our copies are up there. Catherine and Simon are both safe on the Ark. Be happy for them.
Are you crazy? We're gonna die down here with those fuckers living at large on a spaceship. They're not us. They're not us.
I'm sorry you feel that way, Simon. I'm proud of what we did. We made sure that something of the hundreds of thousands of years of human history survives, that something lives on.
No. Fuck this. Fuck this. Fuck you. Fuck you, Catherine. You lied. And I believed in you. I trusted you. You said we're getting on the fucking Ark.
We are on the Ark, you idiot. I didn't lie. I can't be responsible for your goddamn ignorance. You
fuck! Catherine? Please don't leave me alone. Catherine? Catherine?
I think about this scene a lot. It brought such a powerful feeling of loneliness. It's horrifying realizing Simon is now alone in this horrifying nightmare of Pathos 2. There's nothing for him to do. What could he do? It's one of those things that you have to experience firsthand to truly understand. But I think the game did a perfect job at building up to this one scene. It's such a perfect way to end it. Or so you think. Just when you think it can't get any better, after the end credits, you get to play the version of Simon that made it onto the Ark. You get to see the beautiful trees and the luscious green grass. It's beautiful. And towards the end, you meet up with Catherine and make your way into the city. And after this, the screen goes black, and then shows the satellite holding the Ark floating freely in outer space. There's something so beautiful and yet so sad about this shot. It encapsulates everything about SOMA so well. The satellite represents the last of humanity and all the hard work and sacrifices that were made to get it out there into space. But at the same time, it's really sad and depressing because where will humanity go from there? What is there left to do? Eventually it'll break and shut down. So what is the point of it all? One huge thing that I got from the scene is just how far life will go to keep living. More specifically, how far human beings will go to keep living. It's like everyone says, you never know what you have till you lost it. I think a lot of us take life for granted and need to remember living is a gift. Getting to experience life is special, and you only get one of those. I think that's why the scene speaks to me so much. It encapsulates all those feelings into one shot, and it's truly a masterpiece. This game does such a great job at getting inside your head and making you question things that you've never thought about. It guides you through these quite honestly very complex ideas and lays them out in a way that's easily digestible. It's also a concept that is easily relatable. We all know what it's like to have consciousness. If you don't know, you might want to get that checked. But it's a topic that we can all understand and talk about with each other, and I think that's another reason why this is such a great psychological horror game. It's so impactful and is one of those games you'll find yourself thinking about years later if you connected strongly to the game. It's also the immersion that really grabs you and gets you feeling like you're a part of it. I've always liked that about frictional games. Their game mechanics are almost always about how can we make a flat screen game as immersive as possible. You can freely move drawers, doors, almost any item that isn't bolted or welded together. You're able to interact with everything, and it makes it so much more impactful because of it. Even loading screens are smartly hidden with the use of these pressuring chambers when entering or exiting a building. Not one moment is interrupted or reminds you that you're playing a game. Now, that's not to say this game is perfect, nothing ever is. I've heard some people say that the enemies aren't that scary or the gameplay can be a little boring at times. And I can understand that. There isn't as much focus on the monsters, most of them feel kind of the same in how you deal with them. There isn't any weapons or inventory system. It's your normal run and hide type of horror game. But I think the game mechanics and the game loop fit really well with the story, and I think that was the main focus out of every element in this game. Having a complex inventory system with some weapons would distract from the story and dilute the message of being alone and being helpless to what's going on around you. Another problem I noticed, and a lot of other fans, is how Simon somehow still believes he's gonna enter the Ark, even though he already experienced what would actually happen back at Omnicron. I think realistically, it makes perfect sense that Simon wouldn't fully understand this right away. There's a lot happening to him, and he's experiencing everything for the first time. I don't blame him for misunderstanding that he himself wouldn't be able to go on the Ark. But from a gameplay and entertainment standpoint, it's kind of hard to see that when, at the end of the day, it is just a game with a made-up story. You think Simon would remember this crucial point. I personally think the scene still hits and works as intended, but I can totally understand where people are coming from. But overall, this game is truly a psychological masterpiece, and I don't know if we'll ever get another game like this. It's truly one of a kind. But all that said, if you enjoyed this video and need more Devilish content, take a deep dive into the behind-the-scenes horrors on my Patreon, or join me on my discovery as to why so many horror games feel the same. With that said, see you next time.